Hi friends, this is Ammunizers. You can also call me Marcus. Today we'll be doing a project walkthrough on my latest track, Plucks, since it's the most requested track for the next project walkthrough. Without further ado, let's get on with it. This is the entire track of Plucks. I'm going to do it a bit different from my previous walkthrough videos. Instead of explaining everything, I'll just explain what are the significant components of the song. So it's best to, keep the video short and not as lengthy. I am going to share with you guys on the clock sample because that's the sound you hear first. Nothing too special, this is just a regular effects clock sample from the Kashmir effects subfolder. With these effects on, most of my effects in this song are automated. So as you can see in the project, there is lines I drew here that automates the knob depending on what kind of effect I'm placing. For example, this is the cutoff frequency. This is the automation of the reverb. For example, at this point the reverb is a bit higher, and at this point the reverb is lower. That's one example of what automation can do. It can manipulate the sound, giving it more variation and less monotony. What I did was to just automate the cutoff, which is the frequency, high pass frequency and reverb. So in other instances, like for example this part of the song, you hear it like it's a very echo reverby kind of effect. Let's talk about the leads, because leads are always important in any song. People will ask, especially music producers, they will ask, what synth do you use for your leads? As you can see right here, there's a lot of automation just like the clock. It does the same thing. You can see from this pattern, it's the frequency cutoff automation. Let me just play it without the effects. What synth did I use? It is FL's native Citrus, Fruity Citrus. In my opinion, this plugin is underrated. There's so much more to learn. I haven't mastered this. In fact, I don't really know how to use Citrus, but I know once you master it, you can definitely create awesome, spectacular sounds with it. This is just a preset I picked. It sounds like those 80s synth retro kind of feeling. So with the effects, let me just explain them quickly what I've placed. A gross beat, this is a preset within FL Studio's. Of course, it's another native plugin. 1/6 bit gate, it gives that choppy effect. Second is the love filter, which mainly for this knob, as you saw just now, to automate that fading in cutoff effect. Vinyl, this is a kind of a miscellaneous effect. This is from Isotope. It gives that kind of a lo-fi crackling noise. This part is when the vinyl sound comes in. Let's take a listen. You can hear the vinyl crackling sound. It's still going on because at this point it has been activated. Fruity limiter, this is more for compression, just to cut off the peaks of the synth. And finally, balance. As you know from my previous video, the walkthroughs, I always use Fruity Balance to automate the volume of each channel. So every single channel, especially leads, I would have a Fruity Balance. We will go to bass. Yes, let's hear the bass. The bass is nothing special. The synth I've used is Fruity Citrus again, under a preset of sub bass. I didn't do anything much. The effects on the bass are just compression and Fruity Balance to automate the volume of the bass throughout the song. So that's the bass. Now this is something new because I remember in FL Studio back then, around version 11, there was no such thing as Plucks. And it's called Plucks, yeah. It's named after Plucks. What I mean by that is that because this Pluck sound is coming from a plugin called Plucked. That's what it does. It just gives that plucking sound. Let's just take a listen. As you can see, the controls are pretty normal. You have the decay. So with a longer decay, the pluck sounds is much longer. As compared to when it's shorter, it gives that short note. So it's more of a pluck when the decay is lower. And the color, I think it's just saturation. I'm not really sure about this. Maybe a bit of flanger or saturation. I'm not sure. I need to check the manual. What is important is that the pluck sounds good. To make it sound good, I've placed a shit ton of automations. Like, okay, the effects. I have a parametric EQ, number 1, to cut off the lows, because in Pluck synths, obviously you need to make room for the kick and bass. That is very obvious. At the same time, when a Pluck synth has a low frequency, it's just unnecessary because it's going to clash with the bass and the drum. Reverb, same thing, just to give that roomy effect. Fast LP for the cutoff frequency. So instead of fruity love filter, I've used just another simple low pass cutoff. Sound goodizer, of course, everyone says that sound goodizer makes your sound good, which it does. So people say always put your sound goodizer on your master. Only producers will get this, but basically sound goodizer is like kind of like a mastering plugin. It just gives more distortion, loudness, and clarity. Although this is not always a solution. Sound goodizer could sometimes ruin your sound when you overdo it, but just a bit is fine. So around 20%, I believe this 20% of the knob. No, that's less than that. But either way, it's basically the sweet spot for this. How does it sound like without the sound goodizer? Let's just take a listen. This is with the sound goodizer. As you can hear, subtle, but it's much more fuller in sound, if that makes sense. Surgical EQ, parametric EQ, and another parametric EQ, and another parametric EQ. This because there was a very harsh frequency right here, so I just put a steep bell curve just to cut off that son of a bitch frequency. Effector to give that 8-bit kind of effect. So without this, it sounds like just a regular Pluck sound. Pretty dry. And with it, especially the lo-fi preset, you have that 8-bit sound, kind of like those game soundtracks back in the Game Boy days. And Nicky Romero Kickstart, which is the sidechain plugin, because to give that pumping effect. Yep, that's all for the Plucks. Let's just take a listen to it on certain parts of the song, especially when there's a lot going on, like this. And finally, we're going to move down a bit lower to the bottom portion of the project. This is where I would say the best part in hip-hop trap music would be, which is the drums, the kick, the snare, the bass, the hi-hats, the 808s. The kick sounds like this. It's just a basic kick. What I did change here is to boost the waveform. Originally it sounded like this. It's still a hard hitting kick, but I want it to hit a bit harder. So I've actually placed the clip so that the waveform doesn't pass 0 dB, which is a pretty useful feature, because without this clip on, And if you were to boost your waveforms, then your waveforms are going to clip, and we don't want that. So an example here, when it's all the way down, you can hear the kick. I recommend you listen to this through headphones or good speakers, then you will be able to tell the difference. As I boost it, you can see the waveforms are chopped off at 0 dB. And now when I play it, the kick hits harder. But if you were to overdo it, it will start to distort. And that's when you get those kind of like really heavy, hardcore trap kind of beats. Of course, it works on some songs, but in this case, it's much better to use it subtly. That's all for the kick. Moving on to the snare. It's just a basic snare from, I believe this is from the Production Music Live sample pack, the best trap sample pack, which I purchased about a year ago. With the kick, it sounds like this. Again, nothing too special. I've actually placed another snare right here, which sounds like this. And I reversed it just to give that sucking effect, like this. We have this sample called the bell. This was heavily edited. This was an accidental, well, how would I put it, like a sample where I did not intend it to be, but it just sounded good. So originally it's not, well, you can hear it's a bell, but the original sound is a clap, but with a lot of low cut. So how it sounds like on its own, let me just turn off the EQ here. There you go. What I did was just to I don't know what this knob does. It basically manipulates the waveform. Like for example with I have no idea what it does, but it just changes the position of the waveform, and it normalizes certain parts of the waveform to give it a different kind of effect. So I've actually played around until I got this sound. So it's originally a clap, and you can hear the bell on the background. But once I've done this edit, you can hear it's just the bell. So this is just discovered by accident. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't even planned. It wasn't skills, but it was just playing around with knobs until I thought, wow, this is cool. Let's layer it with the snare. So it sounds much better. It just makes the snare and the bell glue well together just to make it fuller. Hi-hats, they sound like this. I've placed it in the piano roll because in hip-hop, if you put your hi-hats in your piano roll, especially in FL Studio, you'll be able to manipulate a lot of stuff, and you have a lot of things in control. For example, I could adjust the velocity, as in the how hard the note hits. For example, when you hit it on the keyboard. So at this point, you can see under the velocity tab here, the hi-hat fades out slowly. Not slowly, but it fades off the volume in volume. Yep. You will notice the pitch changes because as you go down here, find pitch, you can see I've actually pitched this up and I've pitched this down. At 0.0, the hi-hat is playing at its original pitch, and as I've just dragged this up, you can hear the hi-hat pitches up. And conversely, right at this point, the hi-hat pitches down. Moving on to 808. Everybody loves 808 because 808 is one, if not one next to the kick, the most important element. The 808 is just a basic 808 sample, not too special. As you can see, this is the waveform. I've actually turned on the envelope and increased the attack. So instead of doing side chaining, this is kind of like side chaining. It's like the attack is increased, so it creates room for the kick to hit when the 808 fades in, if that makes sense. With the kick, it sounds like this. The 808 is hitting hard because this particular sample is very good, so I don't have to do anything. For the effects, I've placed a bit of a distortion to make the 808 fatter. EQ, I boost the lows and cut off the highs. And limiter, this is just for compression, just to squash that 808 a bit. All together with all the drums. Let's bring in the Plucks because it sounds much more sexy like that. If you've heard the original song, something sounds a bit off. That's because I've placed lots of miscellaneous sounds. For example, like this. They're all random effects which I just chucked in, and if it sounds good, then it sounds good. If it doesn't sound good, I would replace it with something that sounds good. Another one here, which is pretty cool, a bit of work I put into this, is an LFO automation on the pitch and the volume, so it gives that kind of wobbly effect. Just take a listen. Without the automation, it just sounds like this. So you get the gist of it. As you can hear from previously, it sounds quite empty without the miscellaneous sounds. Once again, let's just take a listen without it. See, at this point where the pluck doesn't hit, as you can see, there are gaps between the notes. That's where I put in the miscellaneous sound to fill up that gap with it. That's pretty much it for Plucks. It's a very simple song, but I really love the outcome of it. The automation clips have played a huge role in this project because all this effects gives the song uniqueness to it, if that makes sense. I highly recommend you to take a listen to Plucks on Spotify or my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. I would catch you guys in the future if I have any other, or let's say if there's any requests, maybe leave it down in the comments if you want to see more of this kind of project walkthrough videos. It's a bit different, but yeah, that's how I would do it to shrink the time. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.